recording.
I'll just wait a couple of minutes, Paresh, before I start, because people usually come in the first couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Just as people are starting to come in, I've just left a little note in the chat. Please feel free to leave questions or comments for our speakers as we go. I think Faina's expecting a few questions at least, aren't you, Faina, on what they're doing, what council is doing, and how people are going to adjust.
Maybe
So
one or
maybe
two questions.
What's that?
Or maybe one or two questions, sure.
Maybe one or two. I think you could have a very engaged audience, Faina, who are all right on board with this already.
very much looking forward to it. It should be good.
That's great.
David, should I start? Or Paresh, should I start? Or just give me a cue when you want me to start.
We'll just leave it one more minute.
Sure.
Yeah, and then just get started.
Hi, Annette. Hi, David. Hi, Mandy.
Hi.
Hi. Others are behind the black screen. So Julian, Alan. Hi, Alan.
Sarah, do you want to kick off
Yeah,
proceedings?
I'll kick off. So, good evening, everybody. Mātu karu, which I believe is hello in the language of the Bunurong people. A warm welcome to you all and to our special guests for our talk tonight. My name is Sarah, and I'm a first-generation Australian, born in England, United Kingdom. As we meet here tonight because of the climate emergency which unites us in deep concern and action, I would like to acknowledge the Bunurong people on whose land many of us meet tonight, but also the traditional owners of the lands where others of you are. I acknowledge their connection to land, sea, and community, and that they cared for this beautiful land for eons of time. I acknowledge that their rights to this land have never been ceded, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Over to you, Kylie. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Just welcome everyone to tonight's forum. We're continuing in the vein of delivering forums that talk about climate solutions that we can all contribute to. And waste is no different in that respect. And in fact, in the council area of Bayside, waste contributes about 8% to our local carbon footprint. So it is significant, not as much as the electricity sector, but it's certainly very significant. And before I move on into introducing our speakers, came to mind today a comment or a quote, if you like, from renowned natural historian and BBC presenter Sir David Attenborough in recent years, when he was asked by a very young man about what he would do to actually save the planet. And Sir David's response was, you can do more and more the longer you live, but the best thing to think about is not waste things. Don't waste electricity, don't waste paper, don't waste food. Live the way you want, but just don't waste. So they're really important words from someone who's done so much for our natural world. And I just thought, well, that's quite fitting in terms of what we're trying to address tonight. Our first speaker this evening, and we're delighted to have both our speakers here with us, is Emily Hui. Emily has a mission to empower our collective community to take action for people and the planet. She's an avid learner and passionate educator with experience in early years, primary, secondary, education consulting, international baccalaureate or IB, positive education and environmental sustainability. She's an intersectional environmentalist with roles including climate reality leader. In fact, Emily and I trained in the same cohort just last year. Eco Centre citizen scientist, First Nations ally, and is one of the co-founders of Zero Waste Victoria and the Zero Waste Festival that educates, empowers and advocates for a world without waste. Emily lives, works and plays with respect and gratitude on Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung country. Welcome, Emily, and thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much for the welcome, and thank you for inviting us, well, me. It's really lovely to talk to everyone here. I'm very grateful to be here. So I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully you should be able to see that. Can I get a thumbs up? Just checking. Okay, lovely. So I'd just like to begin with this quote. It's one of my favorite. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And I think this Margaret Mead quote just really helps with what you all are doing as part of the Bayside Climate Group, and as well as your own spheres of influence in the areas of your own life. So it's really wonderful to be here. Okay, so we're on one planet. What actions can we take? So we're talking about waste tonight, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country this evening. There has been some slight changes with the current RAP that's coming into effect on 1st of July, but I'd also acknowledge the Boonwurrung and Bunurong people around the spaces and all around Kulin Nation, and the traditional custodians of the lands that you're on as well, and acknowledge their over 65,000 years of ways of knowing, doing, and that we have a lot to learn, and would like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just going to begin with a video. So hopefully this works.
4.5 billion years ago, a giant
Pardon me, I just pressed the wrong thing.
molecular cloud collapses in space, setting free a solar nebula out of which a planet is born, Earth. For 2 billion years, this planet evolves and first life appears. A soup of cells, bacteria, algae, fungi, a myriad of plants come to life. Fish rain the oceans and eat the algae. They absorb the sunlight and store it in their bodies. Dinosaurs, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, they all live and die. And each year, their dead bodies are covered by layers and layers of sediment. Heat and pressure rise, turning them into yellow-black liquid, oil. Humans arrive, and with them, geologists. They study for years to find the oil and build rigs in remote places. Giant pumps extract the liquid, and it's shipped across the oceans. A refinery now cracks it open, and once again it travels. A factory then binds the compounds and turns them into plastic pellets. Stored in big containers, around the world they go. Liquefied, they're molded into the shape of a beautiful spoon. The spoon drops and cools off to harden. Wrapped in plastic, it is put into a box, and the box is put on a pallet, and the pallet is put into a container, and the container is put on a truck, and the truck drives to a port, where the container is put on a ship. And ship, the spoon arrives 6,000 kilometers around the world, where it is picked up by a merchant who puts it on a truck and drives it to a store, where it's placed on a shelf in a temperature-controlled room, where it sits for 2 months until you select it and pay for it with the money you've worked hard for, and you drive the spoon home, which is where you are standing right now with the spoon in your hand. Now tell me, do you still think it's too much effort to use a metal spoon that you just have to wash?
Okay, so hopefully that puts into perspective what I'm going to pardon me, speak about today. So that kind of really just talks about the whole embodied energy of everything that is around us, thinking about one spoon, and that's the journey it's been. So all that collective energy that's come from all that way until that spoon's in your hand. And that's why it's this important thing, thinking and valuing our resources. Doug McMasters from Silo talks about waste as a failure of imagination. And that's something that I truly believe in too. And as we can see, it is the human design, whereas nature, everything is circular. It all lives and then becomes again. So when we talk about zero waste, I'm not talking about these Pinterest perfect jars that are sitting on the shelf. We're talking about real zero waste. Zero waste doesn't look like this. And in the past, what have we learned from the past about zero waste? We've learned from our First Nations people, from people like Bruce Pascoe, but also a lot of wonderful First Nations people about how they've lived sustainably, 65,000 years. We've got a lot to learn there. We've also, somewhat more recently as humans, it's been doing the right thing. What's doing the right thing? Putting rubbish in the bin. And then it became recycling. That was what we were fed. Recycling is going to save us. Make sure you recycle right. But as we can see, this is actually photos that I've taken along my travels. I'm such a waste nerd that I take pictures of waste management systems while I travel. And as we can see, the whole world's been trying to recycle, and more recently, we've seen the issue with recycling. It goes to, council that's doing the best to recycle, and they're in charge of all this. But we've had a real big issue with recycling. We can't ship it to China anymore, so we can't make it someone else's issue. Our planet is kind of really suffocating with the amount of waste we're producing. Is the problem plastic? I don't believe so. Plastic was introduced in the 1950s as this throwaway lifestyle. Great, you're going to save your time, all these wonderful things. However, I think it's that message that has been the issue. Plastics is not evil. Plastics has produced some really great life-saving possibilities. So I'd just like to put it out there that I'm not against plastic, but just to give you an idea, I'm from Zero Waste Victoria. That's one of my many roles. And at Zero Waste Victoria, our mission is to inspire and empower people to reduce plastic consumption and waste through everyday choices and actions. And I hope today that I can share some of these tips and some of the things you probably already know and you're doing. So that is really fantastic to hear, but hopefully you'll learn a few new things as well. As Kylie introduced, I'm Emily Huey. I'm here because I'm empowering our collective community, that includes you, to take action for people and for planet. Some of my roles we've spoken about, but I'm also a really keen scuba diver. And so I see a lot of the rubbish that's in our oceans, and that has come from the land and also from the ocean. It's from humans. And I see that a lot in my eco centre when I'm a citizen scientist that analyzes microplastics. So that's that picture up the top there. We take samples from the Yarra, the Burrung River, and as well as the Merriwell River. Those two rivers, we take samples and we dry it out, and we take out the little tiny microplastics as well as whatever's been caught in that sample. And then we put that data together, and it's been, if you're interested, Clean Bay Blueprint. There's heaps more information out there, and feel free to jump on in and get involved with the Eco Centre as well. I'm also a primary school teacher, so I love educating. I work with other teachers in Resource Smart as well. So we're a great network of educators that are helping each other become more sustainable and teaching that message to the community, and as well as zero waste. Last year we ran the Zero Waste Festival. If you're interested, we have a whole bunch of videos that are on YouTube that you can learn more about zero waste as well. That was a crazy 3 months of my life putting together a 4-day festival, but plenty of content. I'm still processing some videos, but yeah, I'd like to begin the next part thinking about future casting. What sort of world do you believe in? So feel free to type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute and speak as well. What sort of world do you believe in? What world do you see and want? So I'll give you a moment to do that. Oops. A just and clean world. Thank you, Mandy. I'll just give you a moment for anyone else who's keen to share what sort of world you would like. A world in which everyone cares about keeping Earth clean and precious for future generations. Thank you, Evelyn. It's beautiful. A sustainable one free of plastic and other junks, that is Annette. And Kylie said one where the natural world is respected and celebrated, where natural resources are not wasted. And David mentioned a world where we coexist with the natural world. And that is so true, because we are part of the natural world and we often forget that. So presently, it's not that sustainable world that we're all envisioning, a world that respects nature and thoughtfully uses its gifts, as Varesh has also mentioned. It's a world that we have these amazing people who are doing that, and we've got these amazing young people who are walking and talking and showing adults that we want climate justice, we want a world for the future. And that's really wonderful, the work that we're doing here. Thank you, John. You've mentioned a safe and sustainable world for all, a steady state world. Beautiful. So when we're thinking about all those sort of things, a lot of it is in the design. So design is creation with intention. So IDEO's invented some of the lots of different things, including things like the can opener. So when we talk about design, what if we could redesign everything? So today it's thinking about maybe how you can redesign your life, just a few little things that you can use. But when we think about doing things differently, it doesn't have to be massive. Create no waste is what we're ideally going for, but in the reality of life, we still have a lot of waste in our lives, and we just do our best that we can reduce step by step whatever we can do with whatever we've got in the time that we've got as well. So we want to make that sustainable as well. And so we want to try and design out waste and pollution. So however that might be in your life, it could be doing a bin audit and kind of saying, okay, what sort of waste am I bringing to my life? What can I take out? It's keeping products and materials in use. Can you reuse things? Can you repair things? Can you work smarter that way? Regenerate natural systems. Think about how nature works. In permaculture, talk about observe and interact. So observe, see how nature does it. Can we mimic these things and implement them in our lives? And so that really aligns with this circular economy. So you'll hear more and more about circular economy and those sort of things. What is circular economy? Well, when we look at our current design, a lot of the stuff is designed without anything else thought about. They just want to put the product out there. So it's a really linear economy, especially things that are designed to fail within a couple of years because they want you to buy more, or they're doing it super cheap, so they're cutting the cost of the environment by putting lots of chemicals in, or people who are not being paid fairly. All those sort of things. We've been moving towards more of a recycling economy, but we've seen that recycling is not the answer. It's part of the solution, but not the total solution. It's a bit of a band-aid solution in some ways. So we're moving towards this thing called a circular economy. When we're designing things, we design with thinking about the whole. It's not cradle to grave, it's cradle to cradle. So that's another terminology sometimes used. When you're designing something, you're thinking about the next life. How can it be reused? How can it be repaired? And all that sort of thing along the way. So with this, it's about working smarter instead of working harder, because often people go, oh, it's too hard. So what can we do? We can copy, we can cut, we can collaborate. What I mean by is you can copy ideas, say copy ideas from nature. You can cut out ideas from here and here, whatever suits you and your lifestyle. And you can also collaborate. So collaborate with your kids, collaborate with your family, your community. I live in an apartment, so it's great that I can collaborate with my community. I don't have to own everything. I can share things with my neighbors and things like that. So it's thinking in those three different ways. One of the big things we kind of come into is this issue with, oh, it's recyclable, and also getting like the triangle symbol with the plastics number confused with the recycling symbol, things like that. It's a very confusing world. Then there becomes this biodegradable. So is it biodegradable? What do we mean by biodegradable or compostable? Is it, can you chuck it in your home compost, or does it have to go into an industrial compost? So all these sort of things are kind of like the later on stage. What we want to try and do is to think about how can we reduce? And one of the biggest things is in food waste. So we probably have seen the Craig Castle, 1 in 4 bags is thrown away, all that sort of stuff of your food. and his war on waste and everything. And so does anyone know how many MCGs alone that is? I'm a teacher, I still have to quiz. So does anyone know how much Australia throws away in a year? How many MCGs worth of food that we waste? Put your fingers, or you can type it in chat. Oh, we see a few different fingers. Some people say 5, there's 15. Some people are throwing up different sort of fingers. Okay, it is 6 MCGs worth of food. So that's, if you think about the whole entire MCG, that's a lot of food. And considering we have a lot of people that are homeless or people that are without food who are disadvantaged, that's a lot of food going to waste. So one of my things that I personally follow is a FLOSS philosophy. So I go for fresh, local, organic, seasonal, sustainable. It's not always affordable, so you can't always, match all those things, but you can try your best with those sort of things. So for me, FLOSS philosophy is my personal food philosophy. So that includes growing, sharing, and swapping things. It also includes foraging. So sometimes like bay leaves, people who have bay leaf plants have heaps of them. So it's jumping on to sharing platforms. Also, when I was making, I had a lot of carrot top and made pesto, and I traded it with someone with some other things for a pumpkin. So all these, a lot of little things like that. It's pretty amazing what you can do when you just swap things. Sometimes you just can't grow everything. And it's also about making the most of everything. So if you top and tail bits and pieces, throw it in the freezer. Once you get a big bag, put it in and make a big stock. You'll have this amazing, delicious stock. Even the ends of your cheese, throw it in. If you eat cheese, it's a delicious, delicious veggie stock. The other things you can do, of course, are growing your own food. And when you grow your own food, you can also collect your own seeds as well. So down there, my basil seeds. So I always collect my basil seeds, let some go to seed, and I've got plenty of seeds for the next year. And the other thing along the windowsill there is growing your own from little scraps. So I had some leek, I had some spring onions, I chopped the top of the leeks, put the bottom of the leeks in some water, let it grow. You can do that with spring onions, chop the bottom, put that in water. I've got a basil plant there, so I kind of pinch a few leaves, let it grow and things like that. So just thinking about how can you make the most of your items. Of course, there's always going to be some waste at the end. So what you can do is, of course, composting. There's a community compost that's at the Eco Centre, that image, compost in your own garden instead of, so a FOGO sort of system, the food organic gardening organic system is fantastic. But if you want to save that petrol that it takes that truck to go and process everything, keep it within your own system. And then you can use that to compost. Other options, of course, are worm farms and bokashi bins. Bokashi is a Japanese fermenting method, great for small spaces if you're living in an apartment. And also using an app called Share Waste, tapping into community. So if you have compost but you don't have the space, you can find someone who would like to take your compost, or if you've got a compost bin, go, great, I'd love to take some more compost. Then it's free fertilizer for my garden. So those are a few things to do. If you've composted, you've probably seen some of these in the bottom of your compost. This was the bottom of my compost, which of course are fruit stickers. So then it got me thinking about packaging. What can I do about packaging? These little stickers now, you can actually stick it to soft plastic and you can put it into the red cycle bins at Coles and Woolies. But what I've done is I've gone to farmers markets. So you've got some really great farmers markets out in Bayside. So heading to the farmers market is the best, because you go and you meet the farmers, you know what's in season. You can get your fresh, local, organic, seasonal, sustainable food there. Have a conversation, find out, where your food comes from, and you can get some new ideas. So I love farmers market. It's part of my routine that I've built in, but also going to package-free stores. So you've got your, in Hampton, you've got your bulk, your source. There's lots of different bulk stores around. This is actually bulk stores that when I was traveling, I went in US, Germany, and France, I went to bulk stores. So when I was traveling, when we one day can travel again, I always look up bulk stores. So even when I travel within Victoria, things like that, I try and find and source places. So it just takes a little bit of planning, but there's lots of resources out there, including Zero Waste Victoria. We have a group that is a great resource to tap into. It's also about community. So when you're out there in the community, what else can you do? when you're traveling or with places, bringing your own bottle. There's often places you can refill. This is a great ice cream place. Instead of using little plastic ones, they use lovely metal ones. And after you're done, you just pop it in there, and it's a great thing to kind of say, hey, if this place can do it, you can also ask your local ice cream place, you know, show them and kind of advocate for change. And the more people that ask, the more likely that they're going to change. And that's how the whole Keep Cup sort of system has started and grown. And now it's become very much part of what we do in Melbourne. One of my key sort of things that I've started when was bringing my own little kit. So I have it in a little, in my own little pencil case zip bag. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to buy those lovely or make your own lovely cutlery ones. You can if you'd like to. They're fantastic. But I just wrap mine into tea towels, and yes, I just bring my own cutlery. It can just be metal ones, but I just had bamboo ones from my travels. Got a straw, I've got chopsticks, I've got a cup. The cup is not just for coffee. I've used it for so many things. When people are like, oh, would you like to sample some of this product? I'm like, oh yeah, just pour it into my cup. And sometimes I get a whole heap of sample because they're like, oh, great idea, instead of using their little cups. I've also put popcorn in there. I don't know, just everything. It's fantastic. Also a little container. And then with your little hanky or with your little tea towels, you can use it for so many things. I've used it for wrapping bread. I've used it for wrapping used up containers and those sort of things as well. And there's also a great group called BYO Containers. They're part of Zero Waste Victoria. So BYO Containers is advocating for your local meat, fishmongers and places like that to accept containers. So they sign up and they become a BYO container advocate as well, and they have signs which of course acknowledge that customers are taking responsibility that their items are clean, but to kind of show that it is okay to bring your own containers and it's perfectly fine. And the government during COVID have also said that as well. In the bathroom, there's lots of things we can do in the bathroom. Some of the things include you can, instead of liquid shampoo and conditioner, you can use bars. So there's heaps more available these days, and it's fantastic because what does it do? When you've got a bar of soap, it's a concentrate. When you've got a bottle, you've got the concentrate plus water. So you're actually transporting concentrate plus water plus plastic, whereas usually the bars usually come in cardboard, or you can buy them without cardboard even. So it's just those little things. For women's sanitary sort of items, it's thinking about instead of using your pads and your tampons and all that sort of stuff, switching to something like a cup or reusable pads, making those available. So Paula McIntosh from MGC, Melbourne Girls College, they are doing a fantastic job of advocating that these reusable items become available to schools as well. So in a lot of those schools, as part of the government program, is they provide pads and that sort of stuff, but it's disposable. So they're hoping to kind of get more voices in to make this become normal. As well as you can also make your own cleaning products. So this is in kitchen, bathroom, using a bit of vinegar. There's lots of DIY solutions out there. You can also use soap bars for your dishes as well. And cloths, thinking about natural things like 100% cotton. So it could be your sheets that you use, your tea towels that you finish using, and they're kind of getting a bit scraggly. You can cut them up and then just reuse it as a dishcloth. You can get natural sort of things as well, instead of getting those plastic cleaning products and that sort of thing. You can get coconut straws. You can also think about those scraps and that sort of thing, using apples and making your own apple cider vinegar. So there's lots and lots of little things that you can do in the kitchen, as well as beeswax wraps. You can use silicone wraps, and then in the oven you can get those silicone ones as well. So lots of different things, but you don't have to go and buy stuff. Don't have to go and discard all your plastic things. Use what you've got is the very first rule. Then of course, when you kind of get to the next part of like thinking about Okay, you've got a few sort of things. You can also look at repairing. So there's lots of things you can look up on YouTube, or you can go to your local repair cafe. So repair cafe are people who are volunteering their skills, and you just go and pop in a donation. And Jessica here has done an amazing job helping me fix my jeans, helping me fix my bag, and she also taught me some skills as well while I was there. I also, some of my items have been repaired by something that Erin Lewis Fitzgerald used to run called Bright Sparks. Unfortunately, it's not running anymore, but it is a space that was repairing things and then reselling things. So it's just finding things like that, and also keeping an eye. There's a right to repair sort of legislation that people are trying to, the inquiry to kind of put forward to kind of, to people who are, to organizations, to the producers who are making things, to have the right to repair. So objects should have screws that you should be able to take out so you can repair it. But if you're buying the cheap sort of stuff, probably at Kmart and sort of, you might not be actually be able to open it. So we're asking that we have the right to repair as consumers. And when we think about fashion, you probably know the amount of water that takes. This is a great one to kind of share with kids, thinking about 2.5 years of their drinking water. So, you know, that's a long time ago for them. But apart from, you know, keeping and repairing your clothes, it is thinking about buying from ethical and sustainable companies if you do need to buy. But before that, you can exchange clothes. So I'm part of Clothing Exchange. And so we have clothes swaps. It doesn't have to be something organized. I mean, we used to do it for our babies, for our kids. You know, you share, your child's finished with these clothes, you pass it on to someone. Why can't it be the same as adults? Why can't we share our clothing? So that's a few things. You can, of course, go to the op shop, things like that. That's fantastic. And another thing to think about with sharing is there are so many different options. So in Bayside, you've got your Bayside toy library, you've got your Bayside library. So instead of buying new toys, you can use the library instead of buying new books and magazines and things like that. You can go to your Bayside library. You've got on Sandy Street, you've got a little library. So you can, you know, after you're done with your books, you can even pop it in there and find some new books there. As well as Bayside Party Share. So you've got a group, join it on Facebook, and there's a number of people who have a whole set of kits. And even if, so when we can have parties and that sort of thing, you might be going out for a picnic, you don't need to have disposables. You've got this kit that you can just borrow. And if you're looking to host a party or something and you're looking for something specific, just type it in the group. And other Bayside local members will be able to say, oh yeah, I've got that. We've used it once, it's just sitting there. Share waste, I've talked about. Facebook, there's so many community, marketplace, you can use that. Airbnb for travel, Gumtree to Gumtree away your items, Car Next Door for thinking about sharing vehicles. There's so many other different things to tap into when you're sharing. So I guess the main thing I'd like to finish with is we live in a most beautiful, beautiful place. Bayside, you've got beautiful Naarm, the beautiful bay there. It's absolutely incredible, and I'm sure you all have chosen to live in Bayside because of this. So let's keep it beautiful. Remember what your purpose is. Obviously, what your values and what your purpose around this has to do a lot with climate, and zero waste is just one part of it, but hopefully you've had some ideas from this evening. So yeah, I'm going to finish up there. I'd like you to just take a moment. I've done a lot of talking. What changes can we make? I'd like for you to take a moment and share a pledge. What is your one action that you can take to reduce your waste? And feel free to type in the chat or share it by unmuting. But if you'd like to keep in touch, Zero Waste Victoria, we have Instagram. My own personal Instagram is Memtree. So I share a lot of things that I'm doing on there, as well as our Facebook group, Zero Waste Victoria. It's called Zero Waste Vic, because there's also Victoria, as in Victoria, Canada, BC, in Vancouver, BC rather. But we have a really active zero waste community, so our Facebook group, as well as feel free to drop me an email. So I'm Emily at zerowastevictoria.org.au. Thank you very much. So yeah, would love to see your pledges. I'm just going to stop sharing screen so you'll be able to see each other. And yeah, please type what you'd like to pledge as your action.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Emily. That was fabulous. Really appreciate it. And I'd have to say, from being on the Zero Waste Victoria Facebook page for a number of years, you've got thousands of members there. So a lot of people, including yourself, obviously, and the other administrators of the site, provide some really useful information and sharing across all different areas, generally of Victoria, of course, but plenty of members around Bayside and some great ideas. And I think you also used to have too, or you probably still do, there was actually a list on the website of all of the different bulk food shops around Victoria as well. Is that still there?
Yes, so at the moment, it's Reusable Nation has one as well. So we're in the process of combining all our resources with BYO containers, trash less takeaway, and Reusable Nation. So it'll take a bit, but we're updating our website to include, so we're working more collective. So we call it, well, I call it collective genius, and that's what Zero Waste Victoria is. Our whole community, you know, we're all collectively genius. So, you know, if you're 30 years old and if you're 40 years old, combined together, your two brains means you have 70 years old worth of knowledge, so, and skills and everything. So yeah, we've got a great collective genius here of all the people here as well. Yeah. There's
just so many incredible ideas and products that I'd never even heard of before then. I mean, compostable dental floss. There are all sorts of things like, really, I didn't even know you could get it, but just so many different ideas, or some people who do make their own toothpaste, tooth powders. There's so many different things. It's absolutely amazing. And lots of different resources and information and links available again from your website and others as well. And it is an idea that really, not just an idea, I mean, it is a movement, isn't it? The zero waste, or at least reducing waste movement, and moving towards a circular economy. There is so much happening, I think, and so much momentum behind it. It's very exciting.
And I just would like to say thank you, Julian, for mentioning Plastic Free July. I was hoping someone would mention that. If not, I was going to mention Plastic Free July is happening. It's been 10 years of, last year was their 10-year anniversary of Plastic Free July. Just a lady over in WA, Rebecca, who wanted to start something, and 10 years on, it's a global movement. So if you haven't heard of it before, Plastic Free July is encouraging you to reduce your single-use plastic. You can take a pledge depending on where you're at with your journey. It's a lot, it has some really great steps. So if you'd like a guide, sign up to Plastic Free July.
Great, thank you, Emily. I was going to mention it afterwards. So thank you, and Julian as well, for bringing it up now, given we're so close to it as well. That's fabulous. Moving on to our second speaker, and I'll just say we will take more questions at the end when both speakers have finished as well. So please continue to put any questions and comments for Emily in the chat as well. So our second speaker is Faina Levin from Bayside City Council. So Faina is Bayside's Waste Minimisation Officer. And I have to say the council has done some great work in reducing waste and promoting reducing waste over some time, and you would know that Bayside is one of only 9 councils, I think, in Australia that has recently become carbon neutral, which is also very exciting. But in terms of waste specifically, so Faina is going to speak tonight about council's efforts, specifically their plan from the 1st of July next year, so 2022, to switch how often they empty our general waste and the food and green waste bins for residents. So Faina will go through a bit of a history of the food and green waste service, which is just established, I think, a short couple of years ago, and provide an update on landfill diversion in Bayside, and also to answer any questions that particularly locals, obviously in the Bayside area, have on this change. And just noting that community consultation is now open around Bayside as to how council can best support community to make the switch in bin collection frequency. So I'll hand over to you, Faina, and thank you very much for coming along tonight.
Thank you so much, Kylie. Before I begin, I might just say Emily made a really good point during her presentation, and that was about taking advantage of home composting systems. If you have one in place, absolutely take advantage of that. I'm going to promote our curbside food and green waste service quite a lot in this quick presentation, but please keep your own backyard composting systems in mind as your sort of priority. So we'll get started. I'll start by sharing my screen. That might be a good start. Just let me know if you can see that one. Yep, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, let's get started. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect to all traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and of course, any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. So let's get stuck into it. First of all, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I really appreciate it. And basically, as Kylie eloquently put it, I'm here to talk to you about the collection schedule changes scheduled for July 2022, which will see the general waste bin be collected fortnightly and the food and green waste bin get collected weekly. So just to give you some history of the food and green waste service, although I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, we launched the service in July 2019. And since then, we've seen an 11% reduction in the amount of waste we send to landfill, taking our overall landfill diversion rate up to 60%. So the feedback that we've received has been overwhelmingly positive with massive community support, except for some complaints regarding how smelly or messy it can be. So really that ick factor due to that fortnightly collection. So let's backtrack though. Why is putting food in your landfill bin so bad, and why is it so important to recover your food waste? So prior to the launch of the food and green waste service in 2019, Bayside household rubbish bins were 50% full of food waste. So half of it was literally food waste. And about 35% of that food waste was actually deemed avoidable food waste. Avoidable food waste are things like, moldy lettuce sitting at the bottom of your fridge that you've forgotten about, or a whole loaf of bread that's just been stuck in the cupboard and you can no longer eat it. So 35% of it was food that you could have eaten that you'd forgotten about or neglected. So if we were to extrapolate those results across the municipality, it meant that prior to us launching the curbside food and green waste bin, Bayside residents were sending more than 10,000 tonnes of food waste to landfill every single year. And that's actually 14% higher than the Victorian average. So Baysiders are big wasters, unfortunately. The problem with food waste being sent to landfill means that it's actually breaking down in what we call anaerobic conditions, which basically means that there's little to no oxygen there. So when the food waste rots without oxygen, it emits methane, which is a nasty greenhouse gas that we're probably all familiar with, significantly more potent than carbon dioxide. Now, if we recycle food waste instead via the food and green waste bin, we instead send it to be processed into a really high quality, nutritious compost to be used for farms, parks, and gardens. So it's so much better than chucking it in landfill, as you can imagine. I probably don't need to reiterate that point too much to this group. So I've sort of touched on this a little bit, but there are a heap of benefits associated with using the food and green waste bin correctly. So from an environmental perspective, we've got a reduction in waste to landfill, a really high quality compost for our farmers. It's contributing to that circular economy that Emily spoke to a lot, and it reduces emissions from transport. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but our landfill site, so where all the contents of the general waste bin goes, is to a landfill site in Ravenhall. And if you're not familiar with Ravenhall, it's probably because it's not anywhere close to here. It's actually on the other side of the city. And so unfortunately, we're taking all of our waste, tracking it to the other side of the city. So whereas our organics processing facility is in South Dandenong, which is quite significantly closer. But again, just touching on what Emily said, your backyard's even closer. So obviously a priority. From a community perspective, it's a super convenient way to compost for those who don't have the capacity to. It's been really great as an education piece around the impact of landfilling food in the first place. We've got an improved curbside collection system more broadly. And by separating your food waste from your general waste, you're actually aware of the consumption, your consumption. Therefore realizing, oh wow, I'm wasting quite a lot of food waste, and therefore you can reduce it by virtue of seeing just how much you're wasting. From a financial perspective, I guess the key one behind this is that it actually is really expensive to landfill. So currently it costs $65.90 per tonne of waste to put in landfill. That is going to go up to $125.90 per tonne within the next 2 years. and that cost is directly borne by the Bayside ratepayers. And so, of course, as you can imagine, the less we send to the landfill, the better it is for everyone from an environmental, community, and financial perspective. So, who's actually using the service? Around 85% of eligible households have now opted into the service, with many more jumping on board as we promote the collection changes for July 2022. I should have actually mentioned that the service is an opt-in service, so not everyone has it. So now we have identified a few barriers in getting all of the community on, including those that actually have the service already. So we've conducted a general waste audit last November and found that food waste still makes up about 36% of the general waste bin. So some of the key barriers associated with this include the fact that it's a fortnightly collection. We've had lots of feedback from residents saying, I can't continue to use this. It's gross, particularly over summer. It's stinky. I don't want to use this. Change the collection frequency. That's been some of the feedback. Closely linked to that fortnightly collection, again, is the smell and the mess and the ick factor that we spoke about before. And particularly over the warmer months, some residents have reported some nasty things like flies and maggots. Some people don't have a problem with it. It can be the nature of bins. Some people tend to have a real issue with it. A final barrier we've seen is that some don't feel they have enough space for more bins. So we have some solutions to all of those barriers. We've found that a combination of these solutions can actually help encourage more uptake of the food and green waste service, and through that, reduce a heap of waste being sent to landfill. So these include basically the reason why I'm here today, the change in collection frequency. So the food and green waste being collected weekly, while the general waste will be collected fortnightly. I am reiterating it many times throughout this presentation, but I just want to make it super clear what's changing. And then allowing our residents to use the compostable liners to mask some of that smell. Now offering a range of bin sizes to suit a range of households. We've got a smaller recycling, a bigger recycling, smaller food and green waste, a bigger food and green waste, same with the general waste. And of course, really honing in on our encouraging more waste avoidance through education, which of course, if you have less waste, you're increasing your bin capacity. So to the change. So this is our current bin system, a weekly general waste, a fortnightly food and green waste, and a fortnightly recycling. I will just say here that there are no plans to change the fortnightly recycling service, so that's going to remain the same. This is our new curbside system from July 2022. So a weekly food and green waste, a fortnightly general waste, and a fortnightly recycling. I have touched on these, but I will just reiterate, the change will encourage the remaining 15% or so residents to register and encourage more regular use from those that do have the bin already. It will divert more waste from landfill and contribute to that circular economy. It will reduce the issues around smell and mess, and it actually continues to create more high quality compost for our farmers. And it actually, I guess, finally, this change will, I guess, safeguard ratepayers from the financial impacts associated with the landfill levy increases that we spoke to before. Went too far. Sorry. So this change does align really well with a whole host of council strategies and plans, including our recycling and waste management strategy, our climate emergency action plan, and our 2050 community vision. So it really makes sense for us to be actually making this change. So what are other councils doing? I've included this slide because it nicely represents that this system works and that many councils already have or are moving towards making this change. So as you can see, Nil and Bic did it over 10 years ago. They don't actually provide compostable liners, and they've seen a really good reduction in their waste to landfill. Same as Vasco's. Glen Ira, which are our closest neighbours, I guess, are set to do it in literally less than a month. So we'll be watching them closely and seeing how that plays out. But as you can see, it is working. And I did a bit of research, and it turns out that there's 16 councils that have already done it in Victoria alone, and it works. It really increases that. Reduces the volume of waste going to landfill and increases the volume of materials that are able to be recovered. So with all of that context, let's get to where we're at now. As many of you are probably already aware, we've launched a community-wide consultation process, and the objective of this process is to give our community plenty of notice about the change, give them an opportunity to provide feedback on how we can support them so that they have plenty of time to plan for the service change. And also helps us to understand which community members are going to be most impacted by this change. We are aware, children with some parents with children in nappies, or those living with a chronic illness may have some unavoidable waste. We are conscious of that, and we don't want to impact them by this change. And so we really want to hear from everyone on how they feel about this change. How can we support them through this change? That's essentially why we're here. So we basically want to hear from everyone. So our proposed timeline, we're currently at the consultation stage, and this will close on Friday, the 9th of July. So from tomorrow, it'll be 2 weeks left. We will then be gathering and collating all the feedback and reporting back by publishing our community consultation report, and the findings and recommendations will then go to the October council meeting, where they'll discuss what sort of service provisions we'll put in place to support residents when we make this change. So what we want from you, please, apart from obviously this forum where I've been able to speak, and we'll have some, I'm sure Kylie will have some juicy questions and answers, please jump on and have your say. I'll add the link in the chat. As I've said, we really want to hear from everyone to ensure that we're taking everyone's feedback into consideration. We're hearing from those who are really excited about the change and those that have some genuine concerns. You can have your say by jumping on our Have Your Say website and filling in this online survey. It's not too long, it's nice and short. As I said, I'll chuck the link in the chat. And Kylie, I'm happy to take some questions if we have time. And thank you so much for listening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Faina. That was fabulous. And I think it is a great initiative by council. And obviously there are a number of other councils that have taken that step. Please, everyone, do put any other questions that you have now for both Emily and Faina into the chat. Just a quick question to you, Faina, first, while you're not on mute. What do you do? What does council do in terms of the quality control of what goes in the green bins currently? And has that been a problem since it's been introduced? So are people who are using the system generally doing the right thing? And how do you sort of keep that quality control in place?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I guess it's important to note that our organics processor, their name's Secure Environment Australia, and they're based in Dandenong South. They did their own audit of, I think, 11 whole loads of loads, which is a whole truck, 11 trucks full of waste. And they did a really comprehensive audit, and they found that our contamination rate is 1.7%. So that's a really good outcome, in case you're wondering. We're actually very, very pleased with that. For the most part, our community do the right thing. There are some people, inevitably in all communities, there are some people that don't really look at the bins they use. Some people sneak in at night, put things in random people's bins. It's really tricky to manage, but they've got a pretty good system where they do a scan of the waste when it goes through. They've got people on the ground at the facility looking for major contaminants, and then their actual process. And actually, I will say now, I have spoken to them recently because we'd love to start some of the tours to the facility again so our community members can see it. So once we can get those up and running again, I'd really like to promote that to this group so we can get you all out there, because it's a really fabulous way to see what actually happens to the waste that the food waste that you're and your garden waste that you're putting in that bin. So basically, they've got a pretty comprehensive system. It does inevitably have some contamination, but they've got quite a few steps that I guess quality control. So some shredders and a final, I guess, contamination. Sorry, I've forgotten the word. It's like a strainer. and then there's a suction, and then that gets any bit of a piece of plastic. But the best way is to actually show you how it works, because there's a lot of elements to it, and it's very impressive. From our perspective, I guess, education. We have just launched what we're calling a binspection program, where we are leaving bin tags lifting the lids on people's bins, and actually leaving bin tags with key information on whether they've done a great job or there's some room for improvement. We've found that in terms of, I guess, if you're thinking about the food and green waste bin compared to the recycling bin, there's a lot less confusion on what can go in the food and green waste bin. It's a little bit more straightforward. So people do tend to do the right thing.
That sounds great. Well, good to hear that we might waste more food than other people, although hopefully Bayside's improving in that regard. But yeah, at least we're doing the right thing in putting the right compostable material in the bin.
And I will say that stat is from pre-2019. So I'll try and get you an updated figure and see how we're going, if that's changed.
Thank you. Emily, I've got a question for you from Sarah here. Are there any real moves to, hang on, my screen's just changed. Are there any real moves to ban plastic bags in Victoria? The single-use approach has so not worked. Is there any knowledge of what's happening in that regard? So I presume the thicker plastic bags as well, Sarah? Yes.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that there'll always be little loopholes that people kind of find. So when we did launch Ban the Bag campaign, so plastic bag free Vic, it was targeting a whole bunch, but unfortunately once it kind of got in, you know, once we got the 11,000 signatures for an inquiry to happen and everything like that, we were kind of reduced to those sort of things. So it is a constant sort of thing that we're still trying to change. I mean, some things with the single use are coming in the next couple of years, and as more states kind of take up that sort of challenge and more are being announced, Victoria will of course have to follow suit. So it's really just keeping the pressure on, whether it's just continuously asking your local places that you are, your local retail places, you know, writing letters to ask them to do better, putting those feedback surveys when people ask and organizations ask you for surveys and those sort of things. It's we're still working on it. So
Work in progress.
That's coming. Yeah, it's a work in progress.
I guess it's along similar but slightly different lines. There's been a lot of talk over a number of years now about Victoria introducing a container deposit scheme to stop those sorts of containers or reduce those sorts of containers in the environment, including in the river systems that you were talking about protecting. Do you have an update in terms of where we're at with that? I think that was going to be introduced, wasn't it?
I think that's happening, I can't remember the exact year, but it's still quite a few years away, unfortunately. But it was another thing that Cash for Containers, a group of people were lobbying and creating movement. And again, it's one of those things that all the other states are doing. Victoria was a little bit slow, so it's kind of putting the pressure on while everyone else is doing it. And of course, finally, Victoria does jump in, but unfortunately, it will take us a few years, I guess. But yeah, I don't have the latest update. There hasn't been much that has been happening since the announcement.
And your festival that you organised last year, so this year's Zero Waste Festival, I think is going ahead, but it's been delayed. Have you got an update on that one for us? Yes,
we'll be announcing the new date very soon. We just wanted to check in with the latest restrictions. So this year we're actually doing it with Stonington Council. So our last physical festival in 2019 was with Port Phillip Council at St Kilda Town Hall. Last year was online. And this year it's at Malvern Town Hall. Will be happening next month. But yeah, keep your ears out. We'll be announcing the date very soon, and we're really keen to keep it as a physical in-person festival. So yeah, there'll be lots of workshops, talks, plenty of opportunities to connect with other like-minded people and network and be inspired.
Fantastic, that sounds great, thank you. Now there's a couple of questions for you, Faina, in here as well. So I think you maybe that was me asking Julian a while ago too, but someone else has asked, Emily, is it possible, Emily, that I think that should be Faina, to visit the Dandenong South facility, the composting facility? So I think you did take some visits there pre-COVID.
Yes, so during the launch we did arrange some visits. So I've literally emailed my contact there the last 2 days, and they said we can, you know, start the excursions again. It is a limit of 10 people, and it's just about, you know, arranging a bus and then letting everyone know, and when obviously we have time. So we will definitely keep you updated when we arrange some excursions out there, because they are small groups, just because actually the facility isn't really set up for excursions, but it's a really great facility to go and visit too, and that's mainly why we've got to go in such a small group.
And can people, individuals or farmers, actually buy compost from the facility, or how does that work? Yeah,
so they're their own business, so they sell their end product to a range of buyers. So the big ones like Birdettes and Bark King, those kind of large suppliers, well, retail basically, they bag it up and then sell it to places like Bunnings and other hardware stores and other nurseries to sell. So it's kind of tricky for us to say this is definitely from the facility. You'd have to speak to the supplier directly, I guess. I believe that, I want to say Broadbents, they definitely sell the product, but I'm not, it's tricky to follow, I guess.
Okay.
And then of course the farmers actually buy it directly for broadacre cropping. So
thank you. Okay, thank you. Evelyn's just put a comment in the chat that the government is introducing the container deposit scheme in 2023, so still a couple of years away, but thank you for that, Evelyn. It has taken them a while, hasn't it?
yes.
A couple of more council questions. Have there been investigations in how to increase recycling of hard waste, so the hard rubbish collections?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because apart from, I guess, all of the e-waste items and the metals, a lot of it actually does go to landfill. So we've updated our webpage to try and encourage our residents to seek out, I guess, environmentally sustainable alternatives first. So a lot of the ones that Emily mentioned, Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, and those kinds of forums. It is a service that ratepayers pay for, so a lot of residents are quite attached to their hard waste service. But we do try to educate our community about, can you consider, if it's in resellable condition, consider either reselling it or donating it. We've tried to improve our resources on our website. We've uploaded a really nice, I can say that, it's my own work, a list of local op shops on our website that take items in resellable conditions. We've promoted a whole bunch of resources and links, and even added in the hard waste booking online form, have you considered environmentally sustainable options first? So we're trying to, intervene in that process, because people just often, it's actually, I'll have you know, it's our highest visited form on the website, our hard waste online form. So it's got a lot of exposure and a lot of opportunity to educate, but as you can imagine, people get on there and they just want to book their hard waste. So it is tricky to control, but it's certainly on our radar. And and honestly, if anyone here has any suggestions on what we could do, I'm happy, and I'm more than happy to open to those suggestions. I can leave my email in the chat as well.
Just curious, I guess, too, Faina, that, and I can't remember when this rule came in, that you're not supposed to touch anyone else's hard rubbish left out on the curbside, when for many years in Victoria, as long as I can remember, it was one of those things that you're walking past someone's hard rubbish and think, oh, that's fantastic, that's an old worm farm, whatever it is that I could use. Why has the council introduced that rule?
So it's sort of an obscure local law. My understanding is that it was introduced in response to scavengers that leave items strewn all over the nature strip, all over the road, and it's a bit of a hazard. If you are driving by and you see something that you can resell or take home, and you leave the pile as it is as you saw it, I don't see a problem. I'm just conscious that I'm being recorded, and I'm not undermining our local laws. But I don't think that that's what the local law was set out to do. It's more to sort of manage how people treat hard waste piles, and it is still an ongoing issue. And of course, people add to piles and all sorts of things, and non-compliant items particularly are added to hard waste piles. So I think it sort of comes from that light, but I wouldn't take it. I'd be interpret it how you will.
Okay, we'll use our common sense then. Thank you, Faina, in that respect. It's just a shame to see something crushed up in a truck when someone else can actually take it home, fix it and use it.
I honestly, I couldn't agree more. And what we're thinking is we're sort of starting to notice some trends when people do start to book their hard waste, particularly around, December, when they're getting their houses ready for Christmas, or even during a lockdown. You wouldn't believe how many hard waste people are at home, and they're cleaning out their sheds. I think what we might do is start doing some targeted, I guess, marketing to try and remind people, cleaning out your shed, here are some of your options to get rid of your good stuff. And actually, I guess, being a little bit more transparent and reminding people that a lot of this stuff is going to end up in landfill, because I'm actually not too sure what portion of the community do realise that.
Yes, absolutely. And this question, I think, can go to both Emily and Faina. Emily, if you can comment first, perhaps here, that what's your solution for apartments? We might be responsible personally, but what goes into the, this is about communal recycling bins, but also some broader comments around, because we do sometimes see, and sometimes there's private contractors as well that are responsible for waste collection rather than council with apartments. So I guess from a few different perspectives for apartment dwellers, and also there's sometimes comments from people renting that it's not as easy for them to be involved in some of these schemes.
So I do live in apartments, and something that I've found really helpful is getting to know your neighbours and having those conversations with them. That's been sort of the biggest sort of change. Particularly during COVID times, I started a Zoom group. So every weekend we would Zoom in together, and it's really kind of shifted my neighbours and their thoughts around that. They, think twice about that. And they also ask me questions. They kind of take it as a Q&A sometimes. All of a sudden they'll be like, can we put those biscuit trays into the, and it's like, no, you can't. And they're like, oh, why not? So it's really great to have those conversations. Another thing is we've just put up a community notice board, and I've kind of drawn little pictures on there and began conversations on there. People were like, oh, is this recyclable? And then so just little things like that, finding what works for your community. And with share waste, that was something that I introduced to another apartments that I used to live in. So I just kind of just dropped some leaflets in into a couple of neighbours just to share that with, share waste. There's a local person who's just in the next street who will take our compost, and if you want, I'm happy to collect the compost and I'll take it down there. So just to kind of make it as easy as possible for people, and then from that I kind of started having conversations with people, and just little things to make it little personal, human, make it easier for people to shift the change.
Have you tried using either reminders or polite little notices to people who perhaps do the wrong thing? So putting the wrong things in the wrong bin, contaminating recycling bins with food and those sorts of things?
So it's a bit hard to know exactly who, because I live in an apartment that's 110 actually other apartments. But what I do is every week I go through the bins, and then I see kind of what are the things that are in there the most, and then I will do a little reminder that, and I'll post one up and say like, this goes into this bin. So it's like every week there's like one thing that people are aware of, that they can kind of make that adjustment instead of like trying to do too many. I found that that's been helpful. So like tissues don't go in recycling bins, just little things like that. Yeah.
And Faina?
Just from my personal perspective, nothing to do with Bayside. I live in an apartment building with 8 apartments, and it's still tricky to manage. And I'm probably a little bit more passive aggressive than Emily. I take a power board out of the recycling bin and just neatly put it to the side to see what happens to it. So it's probably not the most productive way, but just sometimes you get to that point. So from what we call the multi-unit developments in Bayside, they are really tricky to manage, as you say, Kylie. A lot of them are on private waste contracts, and we don't get that data. So we don't necessarily have all of their waste volumes included in the data that we report on. And so we've found more and more as sort of waste has become more and more in the limelight, multi-unit development residents sort of requesting more from council, and it is limited on what we can do. But what we did do was paired up with a company called Reground. You might be familiar with them, Emily. And we did a pilot with one of our huge multi-unit developments, which I think is actually the biggest one in Bayside, which is on Bay Road in Sandringham. And basically did a huge audit of their waste systems and the waste that they're producing, and actually introduced a food and green waste system and a separate paper and cardboard recycling, and seeing how, I guess, the education interventions and the physical service interventions actually work to improve the source separation at that building. And so what we're going to do from there, we're actually going to get the final report by the end of this financial year, so in the next week. And we're going to use that to see how we can influence the other multi-unit developments around Bayside. We've also put in a grant with, I think it's 7 other councils, a Sustainability Victoria grant, to actually investigate. It's a bit of a implementation / feasibility study of best practice multi-unit development recycling systems. So that should hopefully by the end of that give us some really, and we'll actually probably use a few multi-unit developments in Bayside as again, some more pilots to see what works, what doesn't work. We know that some multi-unit developments have 100 apartments, like the one that Emily lives in, and some only have 8. What are the problems? What are the differences between the two? They shouldn't really, there's no, I guess, silver bullet for all multi-unit developments, and just trying to work out sort of best practice.
That sounds great.
But work in progress, I guess.
The other thing,
sorry, I was just going to say, we also provide signage. If someone calls up about a particular problem, we can deliver them a really comprehensive waste guide they can put on their fridge. And of course, and this obviously doesn't apply to multi-unit developments with private waste collection services, but the bin inspection program also is included for the multi-unit developments that do use council services. So there's a few things. Sorry, Emily.
oh no, that's okay. I just thought of another one, which is jumping on the, what is it called? The board of
Body corporate.
Body
Yes.
corporate board. Yeah.
Yes.
And just kind of, I'm not currently part of it, but I do know people who are, and just kind of putting through different motions. And some of the things that we have done is we've started recycle. We've got tubs for recycling batteries and toners and things, which we take to Officeworks. We've also got a clothing donation bin, and we have a shelf for things for rehoming. So if you've got something you don't want anymore, you just pop it there. And yeah, and our building manager is amazing. He'll take the extra recycling, including like polystyrene, which was recyclable in Stonington sort of areas, you know, just looking at what is recyclable at Bayside, but sort of like that excess sort of stuff that doesn't fit into our bins, our building manager will actually take. So we're very fortunate.
Great ideas.
That's great. And Emily, just obviously with being a teacher and involved in the Resource Smart program as well, my understanding is, again, schools generally use private contractors, and we have, like all areas, I guess we have a lot of schools, both primary and secondary, around Bayside. And as the kids are starting to learn more and more, younger and younger, about waste and being sustainability leaders in grade 4, I think it usually is these days, how do you find that message is filtering through with the waste in our schools, both primary and secondary, especially after War on Waste, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. There's things that I guess schools majority go with more recycling and kind of that message around putting it in the right bin. You've got your mixed recycling, you've got, you know, your soft plastic recycling, you've got your compost. And so it's great that schools are kind of looking at waste audits and then seeing what they can do. I guess as part of the private contractors who take our rubbish and that sort of thing, that's something that our parent green team has really looked into. So they've researched providers, they've kind of kept some data around how much and how often we're being emptied, and we found we didn't actually have to empty it twice a week. Once a week was sufficient. We could actually make it, we could change the bin size and a few other things, and we changed provider as well, and we've actually saved $6,000 by just looking at that. And so it's like having those sort of people on board that can do that sort of research for you. Yeah, so the students are great with educating and taking that home and educating each other. They make some really cool videos during assembly to show, and that kind of spikes up their interest, and doing cleanup days, and just trying to make it fun really is the main thing.
Yes, absolutely. And they're usually good promoting a few nude food days and those sorts of things as well. No packaging with the lunch. Now we're running a bit close to time now. Just one last question here. from Gabriella. What's happening with polystyrene, her pet hate? Yes, any updates?
I think it's all our pet hates. So from my understanding is that there aren't many recyclers that will take just household quantities of polystyrene. There are some recyclers, normally on the other side of the city, actually, in places like Campbellfield, that do take them from large companies that have commercial volumes. So I know that there are some waste and recycling transfer stations, centres that do accept it, but I'm not aware of them actually recycling it. For example, so the Bayside Waste and Recycling Centre in Talinga Road, Cheltenham, they will take it, but it will go to landfill, unfortunately. So the best thing you can do is, of course, to avoid it, but it's very hard to avoid in many cases. So especially when you're moving house and buying different things, it's very, very tricky. Sorry, Emily, were you going to speak to that as well?
Yeah, I'll just put a link. There's that Recycling Near You website, which helps with a lot of things if you're curious to find out where it's being recycled. So I know Burundara, Monash and a few councils out this way do take polystyrene for recycling. I haven't, from Burundara, that I know that they've spoken about a number of years ago when I took their waste and recycling tour, so follow your recycling tour, they did say that they recycled it. So it was something that was easy to recycle, but is not often recycled because it's large and bulky and hard to transfer. But yeah, you can give it a try and find out. The other thing is, if you're buying something, ask that they take back all the packaging, so you're not left with any of the packaging. So there's a lot of companies that will offer to do that, so they become responsible for that as well. It doesn't become your thing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. We really appreciate the presentations from both of our speakers tonight. Just to finish off, I'm going to cross over to David, who's got a couple of calls to action. I don't need to mention Plastic Free July now, since both Emily and Julian have covered off on that. So good luck, everybody, with reducing your single-use plastic in particular through July. And I'll pass over to you, David.
Thank you, Kylie. Well, the call to action this month is about supporting a Stop Adani campaign. And actually, since Andrew is with us, Andrew, would you like to speak to this? Is Andrew with us?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, this is happening next week. A call to action to help Stop Adani. We've got two actions, one on the Tuesday, the 29th, which we're going to the city to visit a number of financiers of Adani. And so that'll take probably half a day or so, and we're going to a number of different ones to deliver letters to their managers to request that they drop their Adani investments. And then on the Friday, we're going to the Chadstone Shopping Centre to HSBC, and we particularly need a couple more people to help with that one on the Friday, meeting at 2 p.m. at Chadstone. So if you are interested in doing that, maybe put your name in the chat or a question and I can reply to you, and I can fill you in on the details. But yeah, that's 2 o'clock at Woolies at Chadstone, and then we probably go on to Camberwell to the HSBC office there to deliver letters to both of the managers of those institutions, the branches of HSBC. So it's a key time to try and stop Adani, and he's getting a bit of progress on in Queensland, and we'd really like to make it much more difficult for him to carry on if we can affect his finances on a larger scale. So yeah, that's a couple of opportunities there for you. Back to you, David.
Yes, maybe I'll just add a little bit of context to that. BCAG is part of a national Stop Adani network. So we're not doing this on our own. We're doing it in coordination with many other groups that will, on different days next week, will be doing similar actions. So we're writing letters to these various people who we think might be considering helping finance, particularly Adani's insurance, because the campaign so far has been very effective in getting banks to rule out funding the Adani project, and that has forced Adani to dip into their own pockets and finance the work that they've been doing until now with their own funds. But what they can't do is insure their own products. So they do have a couple of insurance policies that are due to expire. Not sure if this year, sometime within the next 12 months. And what all of this campaign is designed to do is to convince the remaining insurers that are not yet on board with boycotting Adani to tell them that they should not agree to renew Adani's insurance company. If they're not insured, they'll be under extreme risk and they'll virtually be forced to stop working. So this is really, could be the culmination of the campaign, getting these financiers that we're going to be visiting next week to agree not to finance, not to insure the Adani project. So we do encourage you to join with us. Those who join will be provided with a letter that they can sign, and we're going to deliver those letters to those companies that you saw on the screen. So please let Andrew know if you're happy to join in this on one of those days next week, next Tuesday or next Friday. Thank you very much. Back to you, Kylie.
Thanks, David. All right, just it remains to me just to say thank you again to our presenters tonight, and thank you to everyone for coming. See you, everyone. Bye.